Good afternoon and welcome to Scan is Here to Help podcast. We're happy that you joined us again for another episode. The reason for this podcast is that we want to inform people about SCAN services. We provide services in a lot of different areas, social services and mental health and substance use. We do a lot of prevention. We do a lot of different services that have to do with behavioral health and um, and just helping people develop in a healthy way. So there were a lot of prevention and also treatment programs that we have, a lot of crisis intervention services that we offer. And actually today we're going to talk about one very important program that we have had for almost 30 years, and as the Sexual Assault Services and Information Program. And with me, well, let me just first introduce myself. My name is Sylvia Flores, and I'm the Executive Vice President of SCAN. And with me is
Sylvia Flores, and I am the Program Director for the Sexual Assault Services and Information Program, also known as SASI.
So we hope that you will learn a lot about this program and learn about the services, but also learn about sexual assault and the impact that it has on victims and or survivors. And at the same time, what are some of the myths and misconceptions that people may have about sexual assault, as well as the needs of victims that may not be, apparent to other people. So we're going to really delve into that. So I guess we can begin by asking you, Ms. Flores, and it is important that we begin with a definition of sexual assault. I know that what it means, but people may have a misconception about it. Can we just describe what sexual assault is?
It is any sexual assault covers many, many crimes, but it is basically any sexual activity or act without the other person's consent.
Any sexual act.
Any sexual act, yes.
Okay, thank you. And so we talk about consent. So can we talk a little bit about what that means? And I guess in my mind, I have a lot of cases in my mind that come to mind that the perpetrator, usually men, but not always, the perpetrator is always saying, well, it was consensual and this and that, or she wanted it, or whatever it is. So can you tell me a little bit about what consent is, so then people can have a good idea of what it means?
Well, consent is agreeing. It's an agreement between two people. It is also going to depend on the age, because you have to be at least 18 years in Texas to consent to any type of sexual activity. It has to do if it was voluntarily given, if it was not coerced, forced, or threatened. If you consent under threat, it is not consent. Mm-hmm. It also has to do with there's certain categories or reasons why a person cannot consent. One, of course, is the age. Mm-hmm. Minors cannot consent in the state of Texas until they're 18. It has to do with if somebody is incapacitated, either by substance use or alcohol, if it was taken voluntarily, or if it was given to them. Persons that are not that are under the influence of alcohol or drugs cannot consent to any type of sexual activity. And for many years, it was used as an excuse. Men, and unfortunately, you mentioned the majority of victims, although anybody can be a victim of sexual assault and anybody can commit sexual assault, mm-hmm. The majority of victims are females and the majority of perpetrators are males. Yeah. So we would have many, many cases where they had agreed to go out, they went out, they were drinking, and the sexual assault would occur, where the victim would say that it was a sexual assault and he would say that it was consensual. Exactly. So what the perpetrator would use was, or the excuse was, well, maybe she was drunk, she was drinking, or she was in and out of it, she doesn't know and she doesn't remember. Mm-hmm. So then the law was passed where if you have any type of sexual interaction or activity with somebody that is under the influence, they cannot consent. Just like a person cannot consent to medical services, you cannot consent to sexual activity.
Yeah. So when you mean intoxicated, it would mean that they passed out or any type of intoxication with that.
Well, it applies to whatever the law considers intoxication. So if you have 0.8,
I see.
which a lot of people think, well, you can still drive, but still it's against the law.
Exactly.
You're considered, intoxicated.
Sure.
The same applies for sexual activity.
Yeah.
If they're under the influence, they cannot consent.
And it makes a great deal of sense because when you begin, drinking or using drugs, a lot of the times your ability to make decisions is not there, and people can actually take advantage of that situation.
And it's one of the many reasons many victims don't report. Because if they were, again, voluntarily taking or drinking drugs or alcohol, or if it was given with the intent to commit the assault, one of the reasons they do that is because the drugs or the alcohol is going to affect their memory.
Exactly.
So when they call law enforcement and they want to file a report, there may be gaps that they don't remember. And that is when unfortunately, the defense attorney will use, well, maybe she consented during that time.
Exactly. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking also from the point of view of trauma, that they also may have difficulty recalling, things that happen, not only because of the substances, because of the nature of sexual assault. So then it's very interesting. And I'm getting a lot of different ideas about questions. But anyway, that one of them is that I can imagine if I am a victim, most likely a female, then if I report it and if I have to disclose to somebody, the police or whoever it is, that I've been using drugs, that there's some stigma attached to it, that I may be viewed in a negative way because I was using substances, I was drinking. Is that the case usually? That prevents people sometimes from reporting because they may be judged?
Absolutely. I mean, there is a huge stigma when it comes to sexual assault. Sexual assault is one of the few crimes where the victim has to prove that she was a victim.
Yeah.
They will question what was she doing? Why was she drinking? Why was she out with this person? What was she wearing? Sexual assault is the only crime that what you were wearing plays a role on how law enforcement, unfortunately, how law enforcement and society is going to judge or going to make the decision if a crime was committed or not.
Really?
If somebody is run over, they don't tell them, well, I mean, why were you wearing black?
Exactly.
If you were wearing orange, people would have seen you. It's very different. Yet when it's a sexual assault, they're going to put everything in question.
So if a woman dresses in a certain way and she is sexually assaulted, what with the systems that are involved in a criminal justice judicial system, how do they view this woman, or people in general? What is the view of a woman that maybe dresses a certain way, that she wanted it, or?
Is why would you put yourself in that situation? By dressing that way,
I see.
You give out a different, it's easy for people to make assumptions.
So there's a lot of stigma attached to
Absolutely.
that women. Yes, I was thinking that it, in a way, and maybe we can talk about this later, that it makes men like they have no choice to actually do that. Like they're provoked instead of men taking responsibility, or the perpetrators taking responsibility. They somehow blame it on how the victim was dressed or how she was behaving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As if men did not have control over their actions.
Over their impulses and their actions. Yeah. So that's pretty. I'm getting upset right now about that. So.
Welcome to my world.
Welcome. I know. It must be really frustrating.
And unfortunately, because things have progressed and there have been some changes, but we see judgment not only from law enforcement, but also from the medical community. And even when they go to court And of course, sexual assault is one of the least reported crimes, therefore, it's one of the least prosecuted.
Yeah.
What they were wearing, their attitude, their behavior, is going to be decided, is going to unfortunately influence the jury.
Yeah.
And now with social media, defense attorneys have access to everything that the
Yeah.
person puts on social media.
So, and I'm going to talk about this later, but we haven't really made a dent in decreasing stigma about sexual assault and how women are viewed and about the situation regarding sexual assaults. And it is really, will be really frustrating. And I'm imagining if I'm a woman that, or any victim, because it also happens with men, that if I know this happened to me and I'm dealing with the trauma, then I'm also going to be dealing with the judgment of others, maybe within my own family, maybe within the system that interact, law enforcement and medical community and such. That then I said, why do I go through that? Why do I put myself through that? And that may prevent them from reporting. Is that the case that you see?
Absolutely, yeah. We've seen, I've been doing this close to 20 years. I hear victims say, the sexual assault was bad, but the way the system treated me was worse.
So, and we know that sexual assault is a traumatic experience that can have a deep impact on the person at the moment, but also later on in life. And what we know is that when people are asked questions or they doubt about the stories or they make judgments about this person, then the person becomes re-traumatized again and again and again, because they have to retell the stories, and then they have to deal with the fact that people may not believe them. So the trauma gets even more complicated. And I'm sure that when you have referred victims for therapy, I'm sure that that's one of the reasons why people avoid maybe making a report.
Again, there has been a lot of change and we are moving in the right direction. But we do need to make sure that everybody learns about sexual assault, not just victims, but also potential perpetrators. And that starts at a very young age, where you will teach your daughter and your son the same thing, that sexual assault is not, you cannot take something that is not given to you willingly.
Yeah.
Teaching them about healthy relationships, about consent, more than anything, also boundaries. Not
Yes.
only setting boundaries, but also respecting other people's boundaries.
Of course.
But yes, it's something that, as I mentioned, we are moving in the right direction. A new law just passed that all law enforcement has to be trauma trained.
Yeah, I mean, training is important, and I'm not being a pessimist or a cynic, but laws being passed doesn't mean that there's change or automatic change. Let me reword it. That still those really ideas are really ingrained in our society about how women should be treated, how men should behave towards women, and so forth.
True. You are going against behaviors and beliefs that have been ingrained multi-generational, where women are viewed as, less than, objectified. They are there we are there just for whatever the male wants, when he wants it, and how he wants it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I know that we see it a lot in the Latino community, where it can be if a minor female is having consensual sex with an adult male, immediately they will call the police, they will contact, get services, they will call CPS, everything will be involved if the victim is the daughter. If the victim is a male and he is having a relationship with a 20-year-old, it is kind of applauded. They are not.
That's true. That's true.
This is Nico.
Like men are supposed to do this thing, but not women. So we really have to work really hard in changing those things. And I'm thinking, and maybe I'm getting ahead, but sexual assault is completely preventable.
Absolutely.
If we really teach men how to be kind to women, or how to be kind in general, you know. And I don't want to get off topic, but isn't that, you know, aren't in a way we training men or raising men to be tough, you know, not show emotion, that showing kindness is a weakness, showing tenderness towards others is weakness. So then, you know, isn't that one of the issues that we face, that the more men are able to show compassion for others, the more that they are able to develop healthy relationships with women, the more that they respect women, that they more tend to see women as equals, that would definitely would make a big dent in preventing sexual assault.
For many years, the way they thought that, or the system worked, where in order to prevent sexual assault was where the female or the victim had to take the necessary steps. So, you know, that you would go out in groups, that don't dress like this, don't drink, when in reality, you remove the rapist, rapes will not happen. But it was easier to have women take 10,000 steps in order to prevent a sexual assault and never address or even admit that it is if we didn't have rapists, we wouldn't have any rapes.
Yeah, true. It can be really frustrating. At least I am experiencing some sort of sense of frustration that happened, because, I mean, especially parents, I mean, fathers, you know, when you think about making a dent in sexual assault, you know, what are some of the things that you're modeling for your sons? What are some of the things that, and I'm having emotion right now, but what are some of the things that you are telling your sons how to treat women? You know, how do you yourself behave towards your spouse or to your girlfriend in a way that your son sees that, and that becomes a model for him?
Yeah, setting an example, because you can tell your children, don't do this, don't do this. But if you're doing it, it is not going to make a difference. And unfortunately, that is what we are facing. I mean, we are trying to change all these social norms in one generation. And it is really hard, because we have part of our program also provides primary prevention to kids in school, where we teach empathy, where we teach, you know, what it is to be what is healthy masculinity. But we're there 1 hour. They go home. And when there is nobody there to reinforce it, it's really difficult for the kids, and it is a lot easier for them to fall into the pattern that they have, that is accepted with their family.
Yeah. So it's tough. And not only because of, you know, how fathers are and what kind of role models they are for their sons, but also I'm thinking about social media and the messages that social media sends about women, you know, and what's available in the internet.
Oh, media in general. I mean, we've seen the objectification of women for many, many years, and it was accepted. It still is. You hear it in the music. You know, violence against women is, I mean, saturated. Movies, internet, social media. So for children or for teenagers, it is really, really difficult to make that decision, make that move. And without the support of the parents, it's going to be even harder, because they're going against everything.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about how sexual assault may be intimately connected to domestic violence, in the sense that if I am a child and I witness domestic violence, then I think that women are less important, or I can do whatever with a woman. Exactly. And that may be connected to that. So how do we teach parents, you know, to pass that along? When I was a kid, my dad told me, and I saw that you never hit a woman, you never mistreat a woman, and that stayed with me. And I see now also I'm also a victim of watching social media. So I see how women sometimes are hit, and I don't know when that changed. I thought that this was a value that we held as a culture, that women are to be not touched. And so anyway, that things change. So you mentioned about services, and I'm going to shift the topic of conversation a little bit so we can inform our viewers about what actually your program provides. So can we move in that direction? Can you let us know a little bit about, let's say that I am a woman and I just experienced sexual assault. Then tell me how your program then comes in.
Well, first of all, there's a lot of people that do not know, number one, what sexual assault entails or what is sexual assault. A lot of people think, well, there has to be penetration. It has to be a violent crime. And that's not true. Of course, depending on the level of I guess, sexual activity, it's up to the law to determine what charges they can bring. But any type of sexual activity is considered sexual assault.
Can I just, not to be graphic at all, but if a man, somebody touched, no, not only a man, but a person touches a woman's breasts, is that considered sexual assault?
It's part of
So
sexual violence.
You can report it to the police.
If it's not consensual,
Yeah,
yes.
if it's not consensual.
Absolutely.
Or any other private part of the person, that could be a sexual assault, just the touching once. Okay.
Yes.
So that person can call and
what is going to make a difference, the type of charge that law enforcement can or this person will be facing, it depends. It's going to depend on the age of the victim, the age of the perpetrator, if it's a family member, if it's not a family member, but all of that, it is sexual assault. It is sexual violence. Sexual violence is an umbrella that includes rape, sexual assault, sexual abuse, incest, sexual harassment, voyeurism, because you can also
without touching the person. You can show them like it's pornographic material and things like that, and that will be considered sexual assault.
It is part of the sexual violence. And
sexual violence.
Now we have where they also have the sextortion.
What's that?
Where children or adolescents, it's not limited to, it's not only adolescents, it's also adults. They will go online and they become friends or start a relationship online, and this person asks for pictures. And then after one picture, okay, I want you to send me more. And if you don't send me another one, I'm going to send this picture to your parents. So for a long time, they thought, okay, it's a way for perpetrators to get money, because then they would get the credit card of the parent, but they're also doing it with images. Unless you send me more pictures, I'm going to post it online. I'm going to send it to everybody, all of your friends. I'm going to notify your parents. And because teenagers, or they don't understand, or they've never been told that the parents are going to support them, believe them, they don't tell them. So until it gets very, very...
it will be embarrassing also for kids to disclose that. But you said it also happens at any age.
It also happens with adults. It also happens with adults.
I know cases that has happened with adults. Yeah.
We have also where people are meeting online, and after a few months they decide to meet in person. And this is what always surprises me, because kids are so savvy when it comes to technology, and they don't understand that the person that you think you have a relationship with online is not necessarily the person that he made you or she made you believe. You don't have to prove your identity to create a profile.
But it happens also with adults, and I'm thinking a lot of cases also that happen with adults.
Well, I responded to the hospital, and the victim was a 50-year-old.
Yeah.
So it's not limited. So this is, for everybody. We need to be careful. We need to teach our kids that what you see is not necessarily what is.
Yeah, gotcha. And I'm just talking to our director. Is it okay we go over the time? Okay. Because I mean, we're just getting to some things that are really important. Thank you. So the victim learns about the public learns about what sexual assault is. Let's say that then somebody makes the call and said, I was sexually assaulted. How does your program come in and help?
We provide services to adults. Adults have different rights than minors.
Okay.
The adult, if we receive the call, we are going to ask, okay, when did it happen? If it's less than 120 hours, we inform the victim that they have a right to a medical exam and the collection of forensic evidence.
So you do that over the phone?
Over the phone. That's one way that we can get calls. Or if the victim goes to the hospital, we provide that information there. Or if they call to law enforcement, and law enforcement then transported them to the hospital, we will meet them there at the hospital.
So you will go to the hospital?
We respond to the hospital. Every time there is a victim of sexual assault or sexual abuse, because we respond to all ages.
And what is the role of the staff that go there? What do they do when the victim is there?
We provide information that many times victims don't know. Victims don't know most people don't know their rights when it comes to sexual assault unless you are going through it. Most people, when it comes to sexual assault, will think that it happens like it happens on TV. Mm. That all sexual assaults are violent, which they are not, which happens with strangers, which does not happen, with your husband or with your partner. It's not considered sexual assault. It's just considered domestic violence, and no. So
let me just interrupt you for a little bit, and then we can move back to. So if a wife doesn't want to have sex with the husband, and the husband does it forcefully, then that's sexual assault, and she can call it. He
doesn't even have to use force. They can use threats. For example, unless you have sex, I'm not going to pay the rent.
So a way of controlling.
Yeah, it's a way of coercing, and the wife will agree, not consent. Mm-hmm. Not consent. Yeah. And when it comes to domestic violence, sexual assault is very much a part of domestic violence, except that a lot of people don't see it as a sexual assault because, it's the spouse. Yeah. And even because domestic violence is also another, crime that is very underreported. They will file a report for the domestic violence, but they will not file a report for sexual assault. Mm-hmm. And I've had, victims in my office and explain to them, this is a sexual assault. It is a crime. It is sexual assault, but they will not press charges. Mm-hmm. And what they've told me is, my children know that there's domestic violence. Yeah. I can't let my children know that the father rapes me. Okay.
So you provide a lot of information to the victim right there and then, so they clear any doubts. But I was thinking that prior to that, and maybe imagine, because a trauma, a sexual assault included in that, is that it's so disorganized and people are confused. They don't remember many things. Their emotions are really strong. Their stress response system is still activated. Mm-hmm. They don't know what is going to happen to them. Let's imagine that one of the first things you do is provide emotional support.
Absolutely, we do emotional support. We make sure that they understand that our program is there strictly for the victim. We are not part of law enforcement. We are not part of the medical. We are just there for the victim to provide support, to provide guidance of the system, because as I mentioned, they don't know how the system works. Yeah. Many victims think that because the perpetrator or the accused was arrested, that's it. He's going to stay in jail. And no, we explain, we provide the information of perpetrators, like victims, have rights. Mm-hmm. So it's important that they know that although he was arrested, he can get out on bail. And again, I'm talking, victim as female.
He or she. Yeah.
Yes, when it could be either or. But so that is a lot of times the biggest shock. Like, so they're not gonna keep him in jail. Yeah. No, he has a right to post bail, and we explain the whole system. law enforcement, the person that responds, if you call law enforcement, the officer that responds is not going to be the investigator. He is the officer that was closest to.
I see.
The next step is that an investigator is going to be assigned to that case.
Wow. Okay, I'm thinking that from the point of view of the victim, that you're there and then you're going through all of that, such emotional pain, confusion. Then I'm picturing you guys going over there, having a calming effect on them, grounding them, and at the same time, because most likely they want something to be done about this.
Mm-hmm.
Because all victims have immediately one of the things that they do is they want justice to happen. So it must be discouraging in a way for them to know that it is not as easy for the alleged perpetrator to get the punishment that they think that he or she deserves.
Every sexual assault is different. Every victim is different. What one victim may want is not necessarily what the other. We have victims that all they want is just to prevent an STI and prevent pregnancy, unplanned pregnancy.
You mean a sexually transmitted?
Yeah, sexually transmitted infection, which is part of the exam and part of the collection of evidence. And we want others that want the perpetrator dead.
Yeah.
And so we need wherever the victim is at. If that is what you want, we are there to support. Our job is or our main role is to provide all the information so that they can make an informed decision. Yeah. And what I've noticed is because, as you mentioned, when they go to the hospital, it just happened. Most of the times it just happened. So they might not remember anything that you told them. Victims of sexual assault, adults have a right to make the decision to file a report or not. Minors do not. They automatically call law enforcement. But when it's an adult, they have one of their rights in Texas is to make that decision to file a report or not file a report. And still have access to the collection of forensic evidence.
But they can wait to make that decision if at that time their ability to make decisions is not all there because of what they're experiencing. Can they make that decision there, or they have to make a decision right there and then? About filing the report.
About filing the report, they have 5 years to file the report.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Where we have to make sure that they understand is that they only have 5 days for the collection of evidence.
Oh, yeah.
And if the evidence is collected, then she can wait 5 years to make the decision to file a report or not. Okay. But it's important that we make sure that she understands or he understands. Okay, you only have 5 days. Mm-hmm. You can decide or not decide. You have 5 years for that. But this, you only have 5 days. Mm-hmm. We also provide information as to what the exam is. Yeah. The purpose of the exam, which is really to assist the prosecution. Mm-hmm. And it used to be that once you had the DNA identified, it was automatic. Well, then it did happen. But no, it's not that. It's not that easy. We have cases where the perpetrator will say, "I know you found my DNA. I'm not denying that we had sex. I'm saying it's consensual," and she's saying that it was assault. I see what you mean. And when it comes to sexual assault, and this is why they're so hard to prosecute, there's no witnesses.
Usually, because
when there's minors, it's more likely that there'll be witnesses. But when it's adults, there are no witnesses. Mm. So it's really their word against victims. It's what they call a he said, she said case, and that's why we also inform the victim when you provide the written testimony. Make sure you include everything and don't let anything out. If you were drinking, if you were smoking, if you were taking pills voluntarily, you need to put that because it's going to come out in the exam. Mm-hmm. And then the defense attorney is going to say that she was lying. And just like she was lying there.
It's better to be open about it.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And because we know that trauma affects the memory, one of the things that we also advocate at the hospital is unless the perpetrator has been detained, they can wait at least 2 sleep cycles to do the written testimony, because then it's very hard to go back and change it. So if it just happened and she filed a report, and the officer is going to give her because they're not trauma trained, of course.
Mhm.
They're going to give her all the paperwork where she has to do the written testimony. But they're going to see gaps, and when it's passed on, they're going to see it as an inconsistency. There's inconsistencies
yeah.
because she doesn't know what happened from 10 o'clock at night to 1 o'clock in the morning, or she doesn't remember how she got to the person's apartment, or how she got to her car, or how she got to. So it is important that they understand what trauma does, the effects of trauma, and make sure that they understand that they're not going crazy, because a lot of times the victim thinks I'm going crazy because I don't remember. I didn't fight back, or I didn't.
Well, yeah, and I can think about it because I think it is important that people understand how trauma impacts the brain. And I think I'm glad that law enforcement and others are getting trained on understanding the impact of trauma on people, because one of the things that we know is that people may remember details about something very strongly, and they may not remember other parts. When you're experiencing trauma, then your brain has a tendency to protect itself, and then you may dissociate, meaning that you may disconnect from your experience as a coping mechanism. So you may not remember certain parts. And the other thing is that we usually talk about that when the stress response system is activated, meaning that you're protecting yourself against great danger, and your brain has to react, secreting all kinds of hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and so forth. And then your breathing changes, your blood pressure gets, increases, and all of that stuff. Intense feelings of horror and stuff like that. That we used to say that you either fight or flight, right? Sometimes you run, or sometimes you fight. But we forget now, and we're teaching now, that also freezing, not able to do anything, to just stay there motionless, is also a response with trauma. So victims may not do anything because as a result of the trauma, not because they either wanted it or whatever it is.
And it's very difficult because when they tell the family, the first thing why didn't you fight back?
Yeah, well, yeah.
And up to recently, the victim had to have, proof that she fought back.
No, yeah. Getting me frustrated.
And just like, rape in the marriage, which was only illegal in 1993 in Texas. 1993.
Yeah.
Before that, it was considered.
Texas, I thought Texas was really progressive. Anyway, sorry.
Don't get me started.
So I want to go back. This is a really rich conversation, but okay. So then let's do this quickly. I have two questions that are going to step away from the topic and then come. I want us to come back. This is really important that people know what your program does. But I think one of the things, and I just want to, yes or no, that this happens also in gay couples.
Yes.
It happens also in lesbian couples.
Yes.
And transgender as well population. So this is not only meant to cisgender men to cisgender women, but it happens also in the LGBTQ community. Correct?
They are actually more vulnerable. And because of the system, it is.
You add in another stigma, another stigma.
Yeah. So it's just like for men that it's very hard to report a sexual assault because of how law enforcement is going to respond, or how they're going to be treated by law enforcement. When it is a non-conforming, it is the same. Well, you brought it upon yourself.
Well, not only that, imagine, because of the stigma associated with it, but also, what if they haven't come out yet?
Mm-hmm.
So now they have to come out to everybody, and not because they wanted to do that, which in itself is a really stressful experience for people to share with others, especially in conservative families, that they have either a gender or a sexual preference different than the general population.
And that is something that the perpetrator will use to perpetrate the crime.
knowing that that will be there. Okay. So let's go back a little bit to another question about your program. It is amazing that it's a volunteer-based effort. And I know that you yourself as a staff member, you attend many calls. I know that for a fact. You have a lot of years of experience doing that. But it's amazing that you train volunteers usually that go and help victims. Can you tell us about that?
Well, we recruit volunteers to advocate for survivors because our program is very small. So we could not exist we could not meet the needs without volunteers. So the volunteers will go through the screening, the interview, and then the 40-hour training.
So that would make a big investment to become volunteers.
Yes, it has to be somebody that is committed to be able to respond. And because we know that 1 in 4 women have been victims of some form of sexual violence, we need to make sure that they're okay. Because we've had in trainings where we're in the middle of training and volunteers will walk out because they are triggered, because it brings back everything. So that is something that we need to make sure that they are okay in order to be able to provide the support that the victim is going to need. Because when we respond to the hospital, 90% of the cases, the victim is alone because of the stigma.
Or sometimes if there's a family member, they may be already telling them how come you did that or whatever. So anyway, so it's amazing that, I'm so proud of the volunteers that work in this program. They have volunteered for, throughout since the program has existed, and I met many of them. And I wish that the community understands and values the work that they do, because they do not get paid to actually do that. They do that because they believe that victims need to be helped. So then they become really strong advocates for those victims, and they have to go themselves through really scary experiences when they have to go to the hospital. And I remember the first time that you went to the hospital, how scary it was, intimidating, because, and I'm imagining, because I've never been there, but I'm imagining not only because you're there and you have to hear what the victim went through, but you also have to see the victim interact with law enforcement and interact with the medical staff. If immigration is involved, then you have to see also how they get treated by other agencies, and so it's a honorable work that volunteers do. I don't have the right words to describe it. We're so thankful to them. So let's go back, and maybe we can talk about that later on more. So then the victim gets there, explains that, emotional support, then the exam. What's next?
The SANE, which is the sexual assault nurse examiner, will be contacted and to do the exam, and we have to explain step by step. It is very invasive.
Must be scary.
Very scary for them, and we have to understand that it's somebody that has been just sexually assaulted. It's painful. It's physically painful.
Oh my goodness.
Because they have to go into places to find some type of DNA.
Going through the private parts.
So we have to make sure that we are there to support them, again, because when it comes to sexual assault, it may be that we're the only ones there. When we respond to the hospital and it's at the ER, and now, thank God, we have SANEs at Doctors Hospital, at a Laredo Medical Center, and also at their standalone emergency room.
Oh, nice.
You can tell right away if it was an accident, and all the family members are there. If somebody had a heart attack, everybody's there. They call everybody, and when it's a victim of sexual, she is complete. 90% of the time, they're by themselves. They don't know who they can trust, who is not going to judge them. So we want to make sure that they know that First of all, that we believe them, because a lot of times, and this is something that we've told them, we need to make sure that they understand if they make the decision to file a report, because as adults, as I mentioned, they don't have to file a report, that they understand that if there is no evidence and the DA doesn't take the case because there is no evidence, they need evidence in order to take the case, to trial. That it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It does not mean that it didn't happen, and it does not mean that it's not going to affect them. So we're going to tell, if it's a parent of a child, these are the behaviors that you need to look out for, and in themselves, because sexual assault has short-term and long-term, consequences. From what people might expect and think right away. Okay, well, depression, anxiety, mental health, but also your financial or your economic, your
ability to make money.
Exactly. If you can't focus at work, or if you cannot take the time needed, that is going to prevent you from either keeping your job or getting a promotion.
Yes.
Because it's going to affect, your productivity. The same with people that are in school. If you can't focus in school, it's going to affect your grades, and it's going to affect your GPA, and it's going to affect what school you go to, what college you go to.
Yes.
So the plan that you had when you were 13 is completely different after the sexual assault.
Yes. Yeah, no, and we know that that's the nature of trauma, that trauma impacts you in a lot of different areas. And, you mentioned some of them that may lead to depression, may lead to anxiety, may lead to difficulties concentrating.
Substance use
as a way to cope. And then you may have constant reminders about the trauma that when you least suspect it, but there may be triggers in the environment that may remind you of the trauma, and then you may, what we call re-experience. You may have the same feelings again, which may be difficult for people to cope. So people are tormented by reminders of the trauma. And how important that is, that this can be a life-changing experience for them, not only because what they're going to experience right away after the trauma, but also, later on in life, because it's going to impact different areas of development, relationships, how they view themselves, ability to learn, to remember things. Do they dissociate at times or not? Can they trust others? Can they control these emotions that they have? So then there may be a lot of different reactions to the trauma that may get in the way, and that may really change the course of development. And that's why I think it's so important to be a program that can lessen the impact of the trauma and can get them in a path of recovery and recovery. So then they go there, they go through the invasive exam. Pictures are taken also, you told me.
Yes.
And then they collect information in those really difficult moments. And then what happens?
After in addition to the collection of evidence, they're going to provide preventive medication for sexually transmitted infections, and as well as for possible pregnancy.
And then they go home, and then you schedule an appointment.
We schedule the follow-up, and that is when we will go over everything we went at the hospital, because 80% of the time they're not going to remember everything, because they were just sexually assaulted.
Let me just interrupt you. They will not remember details about what happened, and I'm getting emotional again. But they remember that somebody was there, to help them, to support them. That they will remember. They will remember the volunteer. They will remember the sexual assault staff that went over there. They will remember being supported. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I've had cases where they don't remember it was me at the hospital. They remember until they hear my voice. But they know that somebody was there, but they don't know who it was. So we make sure to inform them of, again, their rights as victims.
And they come to your office and
Yes,
that's
for the
follow-up.
follow-up. And one of the rights of victims is to apply for crime victim compensation, which will cover the expenses, any expense that that you incur as a result of the crime that was committed against you.
Yeah.
So it includes medical, it includes the collection of evidence, it is going to include loss of income. It includes also if the assault was at your home, the crime victim compensation will pay for relocation.
Oh, wow.
Yes. It's a one-time, but yes, they pay for that as long as for all the utilities.
So they wouldn't have the reminders about this.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's an advantage, it's a benefit, but as with any law in Texas, it has to happen inside the house.
I see.
If she lives
If
in
it's
an apartment,
backyard, no.
if it happens in the parking lot, it does not go. But again, I mean, crime victim comp is one of the least benefits used.
Okay.
It also covers travel expenses. For example, if the victim had to be transported or has to go to counseling somewhere else, as long as it's 60 miles, from your home, it'll cover for transportation. Those are the main ones that we use.
Okay. And then you link them to therapy.
Yes.
Mhm.
And we try to address whatever needs they may have. Because if it is a partner, well, now it's a housing issue.
I see.
If it's the father of the children, as I mentioned, every case is different, every victim is different, and we try to address the entire.
Because one of the things is the trauma itself, and there are also what we call secondary adversities. What happens after the trauma? And you say loss of housing, it can be relocating, it can be the kids have to change schools, it can be a loss of income, it can be a lot of different adversities that may happen that also have an equal impact on the victim. Yeah. So you help them with if they need more medical treatment, if they need whatever social services.
We make sure that they go to the hospital. They go for follow-up, for medical follow-up, for not only for their well-being or their physical, but also for STIs, because we know that not most of, or some of them will not appear right there and then. We make sure to link them to, unfortunately, in Laredo, we have very few resources, but we want to make sure that they have access to those. As limited as they are, at least they have the information that they can go ahead and seek. And one of the other things is that services are provided not only to the victim, but also to family. Because we know that if the parent is sexually assaulted, it's going to affect the entire family.
Of course.
If a child is sexually abused, it's going to affect the entire family. So we provide services not only to the primary, but also to the secondary victims.
Yeah, and I think that's important because the more people understand trauma, understand their reactions, the more support that they can provide to the victim, and the less the impact that it's going to have on them. So I have a lot of questions, and I think maybe this is something that we need to have like a follow-up, podcast to really continue talking about this really important issue. So let me just ask you this. So then you go to the hospital, they come for follow-ups, you kind of identify their overall needs in different areas. You kind of link them for support with that. What happens if they go to court?
Victims have a right to have an advocate, not only at the hospital. It's one of the rights as a victim. So if the hospital does not contact the sexual assault program, they are violating their rights. They also have, and this law just passed, the right to have an advocate present during their meetings with law enforcement and throughout the judicial system.
Okay.
So we are the only advocate that can be present from the time that they seek services to the time that they end in court, if they do go to court or not.
Like how important it is to have that support there. And I want to talk about something very delicately, because I don't mean to, I think everybody here in our community does their best that they can. I think sometimes we do not because of lack of knowledge. I think everybody has really good intentions, but sometimes unintentionally systems may re-traumatize the person by asking inappropriate questions. Maybe law enforcement sometimes you get somebody that is very dedicated but doesn't know trauma, doesn't know sexual assault, and may indirectly do harm to it, not by by asking inappropriate questions or not believing the victim. The same goes for the hospital. The same goes for the judicial system. So then, how do you help the systems become more trauma informed? By that I mean, how do they develop a better understanding of how trauma impacts people in order where they interact with these victims, then they don't add to the problem.
Well, ideally, they would go through, we are always available to provide trainings, and we do provide trainings, but the trainings that we provide are mainly for the investigators.
Okay.
Which is.
You're going to ask questions, a lot of detailed questions.
But for a victim to move forward with the case, the first responder has a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not just what they say, it's how they say it. It's their body language. It's their, I mean, because we all have our own bias. We all do. When it comes to advocates, the training is 40 hours. So we make sure that they are trained on how to make sure that is set aside when they go into the hospital. Now with the new law that just passed, everybody has to be trauma trained. Everybody, including receptionists, including the same thing. It's not only for law enforcement, but also for the hospitals. And that'll be from the very, where they're going to sign it. Make sure that they are trauma informed. Make sure that because we know, we've witnessed how the huge difference that it makes.
And I think that the people have, it's important that they understand what victims are going through. That's not true that I've never gone to the hospital with the other one once. And so I was aware that a lot of people are walking in and out, and some of them outside, and sometimes people are maybe not talking about the case, but they're making inappropriate comments, they're laughing, they're whatever, and the victim is paying attention to all of that. So then how do we help people increase sensitivity that how they need to behave either in the patrol car or the hospital, or so they'll know that they can be a source of support for that person in that really vulnerable moment.
It is. Again, we make sure that I wish everybody, and my hope is that because the law goes into effect January 1st, that it will make a huge change.
Yeah.
Because it does. It is true. Not only victims, for some reason, are hypersensitive.
No,
they will read somebody at the minute they walk into the door. So when it comes to advocates, we make sure, it's not only what you say, it's how you say it. So and you have to be present, you have to be genuine, you have to, because they will pick up on it.
Well, and this goes for victims of trauma, you become hypervigilant, you pay attention to things. So then you're looking at people's expressions in their faces. And you may read somebody's face as, they're mad at you or they don't believe you. Your tone of voice is really important. Not only the words that you say, but how you say it. If you are frustrated, if you convey that you don't believe somebody, those can be really impactful to the person, because victims are going to be reading that because they still feel vulnerable. So they have to be reading the environment for the danger clues. So yeah, it's really interesting. And I don't think that we have a lot of time. So, but I would like to maybe we can do a follow. There are many things that we can talk about.
Absolutely.
And I'm gonna give you the charge that you remember what we talked about, so we don't repeat ourselves. But just lastly, where people can get information, if they want help, if they went through this, if it happened sometime back or whatever, what do they need to do?
Okay, services are available to any victim of sexual violence, regardless of when it happened, how it happened, who was the perpetrator, if it was reported or if it wasn't reported. Our services are available because we know that it has long-term impact. Our offices are located at 1702 Hendricks. Our phone number is 568-7105, and you don't need an appointment.
You just can
Walk in, or if you go to the police department now, it's a new law also that law enforcement has to provide information to any victim of sexual violence.
Okay, great. So we're located right in front of the Old Mercy Hospital. It's a white building with big blue letters that scan. So you cannot miss it. It's on Hendricks, right in front of Mercy Hospital. I was just wanted to add one last thing that I want to make sure that I don't forget. We live in a border community. And we know that a lot of times people that are here undocumented, they are particularly vulnerable to victimization because they are afraid to be detected by immigration. So they are a higher risk in my mind because they most likely don't want law enforcement to be involved because they fear getting deported, especially if they have children here, or So what happens in those cases, or just in general? What have you experienced with undocumented men and women who are victimized?
We know that being undocumented, is.
They qualify for services.
Yes, anybody qualifies for it. It is not dependent on your immigration status. Anybody qualifies for services if you're a victim. And they use, unfortunately, people that are documented, that is used against them to perpetrate the crime. We know that 80% of the sexual assault happens with somebody that the victim knows. And more often than not, the perpetrator will tell her, what are you going to do? Call the police?
Yeah.
If you call the police, they're going to call Border Patrol and they're going to deport you. And the kids are going to stay with you. And that's the last thing.
Of course.
But one of the things that we do is we have an agreement with the Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, and we refer them for legal services, which may include divorce, may include child support, custody, but also they will help them with the process to obtain a U visa.
Okay, so they can.
U visa is a visa specifically for victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, and also human trafficking.
Okay.
If the perpetrator is a U.S. citizen, they qualify for another type of visa. So they qualify for two. So what we do is make sure that we link them with the legal services, and they are there to help them with all the process. It is a long process, but definitely it helps. Yeah. Now, for undocumented victims, they will be under the custody of Border Patrol. Sometimes they will get a permit that will allow them to stay in the U.S. because they're going to testify.
Okay.
So, but that process is done through the Office of the DA's office. They're the ones that get that permit and make sure that they're available to testify if the case goes to court, because they do need the victim.
Okay. Gotcha. So before, and then maybe we can pick up here next time. I want to thank you for giving us this interview. And we are offering a $25 certificate, HEB. Gift card. Yeah, gift card. What did I say? Certificate. A $25 gift card, HEB gift card. So then the people who can tell us, the first one who can tell us about the secret phrase, which is?
Consent is mandatory.
Consent is mandatory. And So if you are the first one to tell us the secret word, and we want to also maybe, besides the secret word, anything that you learned about this podcast. So in addition to, so two things, because we want to make sure that you didn't go all the way to the end and then just heard the secret word. But some of the things that, at least a few sentences of what you learned about this podcast, along with the secret phrase. And then and you have to be the first person to actually send it. And then one of the requirements is that you have liked our Facebook page, Scan Serving Children and Adults in Need. I think it's Scan Laredo. If you look us up on Facebook, we also have a page on Instagram. And but we wanted to be which one, Lisette, in Facebook, or you can either be on Instagram or Facebook, but you have must like our page and refer one person to like our page. So if you have a family member that doesn't like their page, then go ahead and ask them to do that, and other people if you can. So. But anyway, I really want to thank you. This was a really rich conversation that we had. And I'm getting emotional again because the people who actually work in this program and are volunteers, they have to experience people telling their traumatic stories again and again and again. And there's an impact that goes to the volunteers and to the staff with the SASI program. So I want to make sure that we pick up here also because we want to know how the community supports this program. We are community-based, we're community-grounded, and this is your program. So how can you help us out? And not only monetarily, which may be helpful, but also sending some kind of support for the staff and recognition of the incredible work that they do. So thank you again, and thank you for being with us. And this SCAN is here to help podcast, talking about the Sexual Assault Services and Information Program operated by SCAN. I hope you have a good afternoon.